Welcome back to the HOJ-Cast. This is episode 26. Apologies for the several week-long break in between episode 25 and 26, but also let that be a foreshadowing that that's going to be more indicative of the cadence of the HOJ-Cast now that the NFL and NBA seasons are in full swing. I definitely dedicate a lot of time to watching sports, love watching sports, and unfortunately that's going to cut into the podcasting time a little bit. Also, things in the sports card industry are very busy. My collecting endeavors are extremely intense right now. Lots of moves being made, lots of things happening, and unfortunately, sometimes that just cuts into the podcasting time. So realistically, I would just want to set an expectation that maybe we'll get a HOJ-Cast once every 3 weeks on average, maybe even once a month during I don't know, the next 4 or 5, 6 months, something like that, just to properly level set. It's ironic because I have so many more things to say now than ever, and I wish I would have been able to say more of them back during the off season in the summer when the cadence was able to put out a HOJ-Cast like once a week, but that's just not going to happen right now and for the foreseeable future, for the next quarter or two. But the crossover will continue for sure. That'll still be every Friday night, and the crossover is nice because it's really driven by questions, whereas the HOJ-Cast is very premeditated. And this episode is going to be no exception. A lot of research went into components of this episode. A lot of thinking went into this episode. And in this episode in particular, it's going to have 3 parts to it. And the 3 parts are exciting to talk about because they sort of naturally intersect. They sort of represent a natural culmination of thoughts that have been building over months and years. And there's going to be no mail days today, unfortunately, not due to a backlog, not due to an absence of cards to discuss. I've got quite the backlog built up of mail days and cards to discuss, and I just need to make the time to tell their stories and to share them to social media and so forth. And that time will come, but we have to be patient. And it's nice having a backlog of mail days to discuss and share. But I mean, it's a lot. It's like dozens and dozens that I want to talk about and tell the story of. And still haven't even finished recapping the Stan trade yet. There's still one more card from that trade that I want to discuss. That'll probably be the topic of my next social media post, or one of my next few whenever we get to it. But enough about that. Let's get to the topic today. Actually, there's going to be 3 segments, but they also relate to the same topic. And the topic is sort of exploring my collecting approach as it has evolved, and sort of revealing the scaffolding, revealing the architecture of how this entire philosophy that I'm going to sort of continue to sketch, how it arrived there, and what it may be, sort of what is it a consequence of, and what are the consequences of it. And that this episode comes with its precursor, with its warning label that this episode, as all HOJ-Casts, or almost all, it's investigative in nature rather than definitive. That it is exploratory, not conclusive. That I give myself permission and leeway to sort of stumble through things, to figure things out as I go, to reason through things, and certainly to correct previous mistakes that I may have made, or to change my mind, and so on and so forth. That the sort of the nature, the spirit of this episode, and many of these episodes, is to develop ideas as an ongoing project, and not to settle anything with any sort of definitive attitude. And I think that precursor, I've issued it a few times, that disclaimer, I guess, but it's quite applicable to what's going to happen today, because these are fairly novel ideas, at least to me, and I'm wrestling through them. So the genesis of this episode was a Facebook message that I got from a collector, from Michael Jordan collector, who watched Frankie, Josh Dawson, Brian Cajun Cardboard, and myself on Cajun Cardboard's YouTube channel, and Brian, he had invited us to come and sort of rank the Cajun hierarchy cards, and I'll get a little bit more into how that worked a little bit later when we talk about that. But he had invited us to do that, and this fellow Michael Jordan collector reached out to me and said, this was a really cool episode, and I wonder if basically you could go into more depth on your show about it. And that sounded great, because there is a lot more depth to go into, and we'll go into that. So sort of here's the context, or the subtext, the background against which this podcast is being recorded, is sort of the idea is ranking Michael Jordan cards, with the obvious caveat that these are my rankings as a collector, but that in no way must they be yours. In no way must they be anybody else's. And that I've, for example, when the four of us collaborated on Cajun's channel, I love hearing and learning from the thought processes and the approaches of other collectors. In fact, any time that a collector is willing to sort of let their guard down or reveal how their decision making works, and as an aside, it is a function of human nature, I think, and human decision making, that a lot of times I don't fully understand the decisions that I'm making, and that reconstructing my decision making process can be very difficult, if not impossible. So granting collectors and content creators the grace to oversimplify or even misunderstand their own decision making, and that isn't absurd, that actually, if we do try to sort of recreate our decision-making faculties, that they're much more complex and impacted by factors that we might not be totally aware of. But with all those things said, anytime a collector is willing to sort of say, well, this is how my thought process worked, and those moments of genuine transparency, I love them. I love to learn a little more about the psychology of collectors anytime they're willing to share it. And so in return, I suppose the least I can do is try to share my psychology as a collector, and sort of all the different ruminations that I've had on my collecting processes, granting myself the grace that I might not fully understand all the mechanisms that are at work. In fact, I'm sure that I don't. So that's the background, or the subtext of this show, is sort of the never-ending enterprise of figuring out how to rank Michael Jordan cards. And this is something we love in sports, by the way. We love to rank the greatest players. What's the mechanism? How do you do it? What's the metric? We love to issue our power rankings. These are the best teams. We love to put things into lists, and so this is no different. I think this is a very similar impulse. It's very fun. It's competitive on some level. Although just because it's competitive, it doesn't mean that. So that's what's great about collecting, in a sense, is that we all can do it differently, and that every approach can have its merits, and that it isn't a sport, it isn't a competition, it isn't my list goes up against yours, and then if that's not how it works at all. It's that instead of it being a competition, it's sort of a narrative, sort of a story being told. And one collection tells this story, a different collection tells that story, and each one has its own it's its own universe to inhabit. But still, the list making impulse is real, and I think it's especially prevalent in sports and sports adjacent things. And I do think that this kind of falls into that lane too. And so but before we get to the substance of sort of my Michael Jordan ranking, and ranking these cards, and sort of how I came up with it, and the shortcomings of it, and before we get to any of that, there is like the second and the third segment of the show are going to be going over the list that I presented to Cajun and friends, and then the third part is going to be sort of diving deeper into it and adding a few things to it. But the first part is just talking about the enterprise of ranking in general. And ranking is ranking cards, figuring out as a collector how I rank cards is a huge topic that will in no way be able to be covered comprehensively in this episode, let alone in this one segment of this episode. But I want to use the opening segment here to sort of set the stage a little bit, and this is how I want to do it. So in the realm of ranking cards, one of the adjudicators that sort of can settle a dispute between cards that are competing for my attention. So let's say I have in front of me two cards, and one card says, well, I'm from this great brand and I'm rare and I have a great photo, and the other card says, well, my design is beautiful and I'm from a really great brand too, and the demand for me, I'm very iconic. Yes, cards are talking to me again, and so I'm deciding which one I want, right? Or I'm deciding which one I think is more collectible. And so how do I make that decision? How do I rank them? And so naturally, price factors into the equation. And so price. First of all, price is just a practical constraint. Price is something that, well, let me know right off the bat if I should even set my sights on it, because if the price is too high, it's never even going to be a feasible card for me to collect anyway. But the other way that price plays a role is that price sort of is understood as a scoreboard. Price is sort of understood as functioning in this way. So let's modify the example a little bit. So let's say instead that there's two collectors, collector A and B, and collector A has their card that they think is great, and collector B has a different card that collector B thinks is great. And they're both at loggerheads, and neither one will give in. Neither one will admit that the other one's card is more preferable. They each think that they have the most preferable card. So there's a natural inclination to say, well, let the market decide. So let A and B each send their card in for sale in this hypothetical, or let's monitor the market really close and see if a card that's very similar to B's card comes to market, and if a card very similar to A's card comes to market. And then let's see what prices are realized, because if B's card sells for more than A's card, then B can sort of say, well, I can go and buy, now that my card is worth more than yours, I could sell my card, I could buy yours and still buy other cards too. So, I could go and buy yours and still have funds left over to have other cards. And so, sort of my card is enabling me, because the price of my card ends up being higher, it's enabling me to do more things collecting wise. And I can get your card and add other cards too. So therefore, my card should rank higher. So you can sort of see there's a common sense. There's a rationality to the idea that price is a decent way to judge or adjudicate between cards. And so price, because of this sort of practical logic of it, because of that very practical thing that I could, that the higher selling card could buy the lower selling card and have room left over for other things, that price is very persuasive. But here is the evolving conundrum. The evolving conundrum is that this price as a scoreboard mechanism is very effective in the context of price being the consequence or the outcome or the output of genuine collector consensus. So if there is a genuine collector consensus that manifests itself in price, then we can expect that price to be replicable, and we can expect that price to sort of genuinely reflect sentiment that collectors have, at least at that time. But what tends to happen more and more as this market, as collectors, as everybody sort of becomes aware of how this process works and how impactful price is as an adjudicator, is that price stops being the output and it starts being the input. And sort of people realize that that a shortcut to a card becoming a high ranking card is just that card realizing a high price. That can sort of bypass the whole process, because people have felt over time they've developed this idea that sort of price is the final arbiter, and we walk through why that's there's a common sense nature to that. But here's the issue: if price isn't reflecting, well, there's two issues. One, price could be reflecting a collector consensus that's based on incomplete information, or that's based on information that we just don't agree with. So it's certainly possible that that there is a common sentiment shared by collectors that manifests itself in a market price that just simply doesn't reflect proper knowledge of the full information available to collectors. And then there's also the problem that the awareness of price, that sort of as people become aware of price, that they sort of realize that they can elevate the status of a card if they're just willing to pay a lot of money for it. And so these are two different factors of price as the scoreboard that need to be deconstructed, or at least that I think are worth deconstructing. And so let's take them one at a time. So the first one is pretty easy. Just simply that if I'm a collector, I see something in the market that other people don't see, then the market consensus isn't super helpful for me to adjudicate things. And I'm not going to look at price as the final adjudicator, because I've made the assessment that I have access to information that other people don't have. So I'm not going to rely on any consensus that they form that appears in the that gets measured as price, because that price is not inclusive of all the information that I have. So that's a pretty easy one to deconstruct. I think a lot of collectors can relate to that. I think many collectors have found through their expertise, through their experience, areas of the market where they just happen to have they just happen to have an extra level of knowledge and expertise, a sophistication that the general market doesn't have, or even within that niche that the consensus that the average collector in that niche doesn't quite have. And so they've identified it. What these are in the world of pricing, these are inefficiencies. They've identified them, and so they are completely justified to say that they're not going to default to price as the ranking mechanism. And so that's deconstructing collector consensus in the first instance I gave. And then there's the second instance, though. And the second instance is really interesting. It's quite topical. And I've seen a lot of collectors, content creators, dance around it or nail it, or really just really hit the nail on the head with this one, which is deconstructing price as something that even is reflecting collector consensus in the first place. Because if price is not, if it turns out that a price is reflecting something other than a collector's consensus, then that price means something totally different than we assumed it meant. So let me give an example to make this a little more solid. Think about the Paul Skeens debut patch autograph card. It came for sale through the Fanatics Premier auction months ago now, and it sold for over $1 million. And there was a lot of pomp and circumstance, a lot of hype. So it's all sort of coming back to me. There was even a story of like a child, writing journal entries about how they, I think this is the same card. The child like wrote journal entries about how they pulled this card, and their family was suffering because they had been affected by the wildfires in California, and they wrote these journal entries, these contemporaneous journal entries, and then they shared them with Fanatics and Topps, and then Fanatics and Topps published them, and it was just this storybook card, this great Skeens card, and it's going to change lives. And then it grades, and it happens to get a PSA 10 card grade and autograph grade, and then it comes to auction with Fanatics, and then it sells for over $1 million. And the $1 million price was eyebrow raising, partially because Skeens' Bowman First Superfractor autograph, 1 of 1, had sold a few times in the ballpark of $120,000, give or take. So this debut patch autograph comes in, and 8, 9 X's, but nearly an order of magnitude more market value. And people pointed out, this is a pitcher, this isn't a home run hitter. He's a rookie. Sure, he's a popular figure, and he's very exciting as a prospect, and he seems to be great, and he's dating a celebrity and stuff. But still, the price certainly warranted skepticism. And who's the sort of the questions that arose is who's the collector who bought this? I mean, not to say that it's not possible, but who bought this and why? Did a dealer buy this? It's hard to fathom a dealer thinking they would make money on this. Not to say that it's not possible either, but just there was skepticism, and the questioning of it was certainly resonated with me. And then the buyer was named, and the buyer was not a collector, and it wasn't a dealer, and it wasn't a speculator, wasn't even an investor. The buyer was a company. It was Dick's Sporting Goods, and they purchased the card, and it quickly became apparent, and I think they announced as part of the reveal that they had purchased the card, that this card would be a feature, a tourist attraction, or a marketing device, a recruiting tool to get people to come into the Dick's store, where it would be featured, and sort of it would, I guess Dick's sort of was rolling out like the second style store concept, and they were selling, or I think they do still sell, sports card products, but they also sell all sorts of sports adjacent products. And so this card, this Skeens card, it actually turns out in retrospect, it sort of seems like, well, it sort of seemed important that the card sold for $1 million, and which is a phenomenal sum of money. It seemed very important that it sold for that much. It seemed like that was important to setting the headline. That was important to the organic sort of marketing that this card would end up generating, and that marketing would end up redirecting people, funneling people to go to Dick's, and it got headlines. I'm pretty sure it made it to national news, and it certainly got a lot of coverage in the sports card hobby. Content creators in the hobby talked about it. Sports commentators in general talked about it. It was a headline associated with Skeens himself, and certainly I'm no expert in how marketing budgets work at the level of multi-billion-dollar companies like Dick's, but I do know a little bit about how marketing budgets work, and I do know a little bit about how much marketing costs. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say that they certainly got their marketing spend out of that card. They got a lot of headlines and a lot of attraction, or a lot of attention. And I don't know how much foot traffic this actually ended up generating for them, but certainly it's certainly made me think about Dick's Sporting Goods more than I had in a long time. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people in the hobby, and perhaps people outside of the hobby too. So anyway, the point of that is to say that purchase of that card was not reflecting community consensus, collector consensus, wasn't reflecting in any way, shape, or form the demand that a collector or a community of collectors might have for that card. And that card was an instrument of business. That card was a marketing expense. That card is a tourist attraction. It serves a lot of different functions, but it certainly is not reflecting collector consensus. Now, somebody can push back and say, but we don't know who the second highest bidder is. Maybe the second highest bidder, and remember, in the auction setting, the second highest bidder, they ultimately set the market price. The market price ends up being one bid increment above what the second highest bidder bid. With the first highest bidder, we don't know what they bid. We just know that they bid more than, there's at least an increment more than the second highest bidder. So the second highest bidder here, who was it? Maybe it was a passionate Skeens collector or something, but or maybe it was another company. Maybe it was Foot Locker. I don't know if Foot Locker is still in business. But maybe it was a similar Dick's style company that had the same intention, and that okay, well, this is a Fanatics made product. Fanatics is very high on this card. Fanatics is selling it through their marketplace, through their premier auction. So if Dick's wants to not only accumulate a great marketing expenditure for itself, but also to show good faith to fanatics as a consumer, buyer, believer in its products, that this, you can check a lot of boxes with this purchase, and maybe another company saw it that way too. So we just don't know. This is totally speculative, but we don't know who the second highest bidder is. But the second highest bidder could have been another company too. And so then like to sort of bring this full circle, then does Dick's or corporations bidding on cards and sort of using them as these kind of, marketing showpieces, should that be instructive on the ranking of cards as a collector? So that's sort of so the first deconstruction is to say, well, what if the community is just wrong, which certainly can happen. So that's sort of one way that price can be misleading, is that that price might not take into account all the information. The second way price can be misleading is that price might just be reflecting a temporary demand that has nothing to do with collecting from a company that has motives that are business related. Now you could sort of push back and say, yeah, but even those business related motives are reflecting something about collecting. Like, why is this card a tourist attraction? It's because, people love cards, and this is the first issue of the debut patch autograph, and it is a great player. And so, it is still reflecting something about cards and about how people feel about cards, and sort of and certainly the community wouldn't dispute that the debut patch autograph of Skeens is one of his most desired, most in-demand cards, and those are all valid points. But so there's certainly a gray area here where it's like, yeah, that sale isn't totally reflecting anything collector consensus, but it's not totally off the mark either. So it's fine. We sort of it's complicated, it's sophisticated, it's nuanced, and it is. But the point is I guess if I could sum it up in one sentence, do I, as a collector, do I want Dick's marketing budget to determine how I rank cards? And when I put it that way, the answer is an obvious no. The answer is a surefire no. So those are, there is a lot more to be said about price. There's a lot more to be said about sort of the market and its participants becoming aware of just how influential price is, and sort of there's a lot to be said about how that can create the temptation to overpay for things, knowing that it is an overpay, but also believing that overpay can raise the card's rank. And so publicizing that overpay can have these downstream effects. It's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And sort of there's something to be investigated, explored there, about how price, so sort of the reason why price has purchase as an arbiter of ranking cards is because it's assumed that price is downstream from a collector consensus that's based on collecting principles. But if that gets subtly inverted, and I think it does get inverted, and it's getting, and the tendency to invert it is becoming more and more prevalent. And so if instead of price reflecting collecting principles, instead price starts determining collecting principles, which I think we're dangerously close to that point if we're not there already. If price ends up determining collecting principles, if setting a high price for something ends up becoming this self-fulfilling prophecy, where I can take a card with none of the principles of collecting that I find to be important, and I can pay a ton of money for it and shout from the mountaintops that I did it, and then that can end up changing the way everybody ranks cards just because Dick's paid a lot of money for it, or whatever. We can see there that the whole thing is standing on a wobbly foundation, and that that foundation certainly if anybody inspects it too closely, that it might start to crumble. So that's why sort of the general idea here is circling back to we've sort of deconstructed price as an arbiter, and we've sort of explored that sort of, if price is seen not as the consequence of collecting decisions, but instead, or not as the consequence of principles of collecting, but instead price determines what collecting principles are in the first place, that all of a sudden in my view as a collector, we have a very shoddy framework there. And so what's the remedy? And I think the remedy is this. I think the remedy is getting back to those collecting principles. Is that my remedy anyways, is not to let Dick's Sporting Goods, and I hate that I'm not picking on them, right? Like, I just, for the record, I think they clearly were very savvy in deciding to pick up that Skeens, and it did quite well for them. And it's a free market, and people are, if they want to spend $1 million on a card, it's a free market. What can we do? I don't love it as a collector. I don't love competing against corporations potentially for cards, but that's a whole different topic. But anyway, not to pick on Dick's too much, but just to say that certainly as a collector, I have no interest in Dick's marketing department having a formative role in determining the ranking of cards, and that is what that and that's a consequence. If price is the adjudicator of how I rank cards, then that marketing department is having a big role, and that is once we've reached that point, I think that's sort of a tipping point. That's where we have to investigate the whole edifice. We have to investigate the whole infrastructure of what does price actually mean, and how how informative should it be on how I collect. And so let's now use that to shepherd us into the second and the third segments of this show. I mean, there's so much I want to say on this first subject, and we'll get to it. Future episodes will dive deeper and deeper into it. But sort of the stepping stone here to the next thing is, let's get back to collecting principles. Let's figure out what the collecting principles are that in the ideal model, in the model where price is reflective of collector consensus, and that collector consensus is emerging from collecting principles, even though that collecting consensus can be wrong because maybe the collectors don't have full knowledge or haven't done as much research or are ignorant of certain things that the most knowledgeable collector in that area is knowledgeable of, that even still, that the assumption is still there that it's all emerging from collector consensus, and that collector consensus is based on collecting principles. But what are those principles? What are those principles? Let us not take those principles for granted. I think it's been made clear that those principles are essential. Those principles are utterly essential, that sort of everything, the hierarchy of the market sort of rests on those principles, and that the more closely and carefully studied collectors are, the more closely and carefully collectors study those principles, the firmer and the sturdier the foundation that the market rests upon is. But collecting principles is something that it's a topic that I think many collectors are wrestling with all the time, and that there are no commandments of collecting principles, that sort of each person has to and has the opportunity and the luxury to figure them out for themselves. And it's very subjective. It's very subjective, like the collecting, if a collecting principle is sort of the card must be beautiful, right? Like if that's a collecting principle, well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Now, there's plenty of pushback to that. There's plenty of people who believe that there's plenty of intersubjective consensus about what beauty is, and sort of questions about how determined is beauty by social contingencies, and like, is there objective beauty or is there not, or how much is objective and how much is just whimsical, how much is socially constructed, how much would be true independent of any particular context. But that's just an example, right? So collecting principles is sort of, it sounds strong and sturdy, and but collecting principles themselves are highly subjective. And so the concerns of subjectivity include, well, the arbitrariness, whimsicalness. The concerns of subjectivity are that people might wake up and like one thing one day and then they like something else the next day, or what people like can be highly manipulated and influenced. And price is one way that can influence what people like, but there are other ways too. If it's constantly, if you're a sort of a passive consumer of content, it's constantly being told to you that this set or this brand is the best, or this player is the best, that without using the mechanism of price, that can be very influential, and that can sort of shape people's subjective preferences. And so that's the concern too, is that people's preferences are malleable, that they can change, that they can be shoved and directed, and that they can be manipulated. So, so as we sort of investigate and look at what should collecting principles be, and is there any way that we can guard against subjectivity, I think a concept emerges, and it's the concept of rarity. The concept of rarity lends itself to measurement. And it in no way is an objective concept. And that might be shocking too at first blush to say, well, rarity, I mean, what do you mean? It's, if something has one copy, it has one. If it has 10, it has 10. If it has 100, it has 100. And that's how rare it is. There's nothing more to it than that. But rarity is a much, much more nuanced topic than that. And that's exploring the nuances of rarity is an ongoing project itself. But the kernel, there is a kernel of truth in the idea that there is something objective about rarity. But there are different types of rarity. There's the we'll get to the types here very briefly, but rarity is an emerging contender as a collecting principle that exists wholly independent of price, that can be used, and it exists independent of sort of brand premium or aesthetic preference. Not to say those things aren't important; they are very important, and they are very formative in how I collect. But rarity is something that lends itself to measurement quite aptly, as I think we're about to see. So rarity is nuanced. Rarity is not an objective fact. There are many different angles and ways to think about and look at rarity. But rarity is as an anchor of a collecting philosophy. Rarity as a collecting principle, I think is a pretty appealing tool. And having set the stage in the precursor to this point of the show, to sort of show how collecting principles actually are very important, and that they can quickly get drowned out by a misplaced sentiment that blossoms into a collector consensus, or they can get drowned. Collector principles can get drowned out by price information. And so if we do stumble into something in the sphere of collecting that we can grasp onto, that is measurable, that sort of does lend itself to very little dispute, that's very powerful. It's very powerful, and I think that's what rarity is. I think rarity is a very powerful tool that cuts through much of the arbitrariness, the whimsicalness, the potential for manipulation, the potential for misunderstanding. It cuts through a lot of that. And so rarity to me is a very appealing topic, and it's still a topic that I'm investigating and exploring. But sort of having arrived at rarity as this property, as this principle of collecting, let's make the next step here and sort of investigate applications of it. And this is applications of rarity are going to be context dependent, because what it means to be rare for a card from the 1950s means something different than what it means to be rare for cards from the 1980s, from the 1990s. And then even there, what's rare for a soccer card from the 2000s is very different than what's rare for a basketball card from the 2000s. So constantly having the sensitivity to context is essential. And so we're going to zoom in on a specific context here. We're going to zoom in on the context of Michael Jordan cards. And I'm going to present one way of using rarity, and you're going to see as this unfolds that assumptions are made, and you don't have to agree with those assumptions. You can make different assumptions, and that this is my application of rarity, but that this doesn't need to be the way that rarity gets applied. That collectors can use rarity in all the different ways that they would like, and that in no way is this a definitive way to use rarity. But I did try it. I tried my hand at it. I found the result to be interesting. And not not that my particular result is correct, or that even as I look over it in preparation for the show, I found things I don't really love, but what is illustrative is the thought experiments of it, the process of it, to me, in my mind, especially sort of given the import that collecting principles have on the ripple effect that they have, that making sure that we get the principles right is pretty important. That going through this thought experiment, I think, for a collector, not copying what I do or what anybody else does, but just going through it for oneself, it might pay big dividends for oneself as a collector. Enough preamble here. All right, let's get to some application. Let's sort of see now how I use rarity. So where I want to start is, so this is going to be two parts. What's going to follow is two parts here. The first is going to be what I did in collaboration with Cajun. And then the second part is going to be an enhancement of that project in response to a fellow Michael Jordan collector's request. But first, let's just start. Let's sketch the project here. So Cajun texted the three of us, Frankie, Josh, myself, and he gave us like sort of a call to action or set of instructions. He said, basically, I've dumbed it down, but basically what he said is, come up with a list of 23 cards that you would choose if every Cajun hierarchy card was sitting on a table in front of you. You cannot sell these 23 cards until you are 65 years old, and you may use whatever criteria you would like to rank them. So already there's in this program that he's created, there's this dimension that you can't sell it until you're 65, but there's sort of this lingering idea that maybe you will sell it, right? So like there's sort of like the market dimension here is present. There is this sort of idea that that balancing the idea of like, every hierarchy card is on a table in front of me, and maybe I like some more than I like others, and I have to keep them for a long time, but maybe it would be most prudent of me to pick the ones that I think the market is going to pick as winners, because I can get, ultimately I can, when I eventually can sell these, I can get the most money for those, and then I can go buy all the ones that I want and have money left over. So like there is this market dimension, there is this Keynesian beauty contest dimension of sort of thinking about not just picking what cards I think are the best, or in the Keynesian example, not just thinking which entrants to the pageant are the most beautiful, but thinking who will other people think are the most beautiful, or thinking what will the market think are the most desirable cards. So like there's that aspect to this too that adds a wrinkle to it. But I'm largely avoiding that wrinkle. I'm largely taking more of a purist approach. I'm largely taking more of a approach that goes back to principles rather than forecasting markets, with the assumption, sort of operating in the background, that if we can nail the principles, then why wouldn't the market follow them ultimately? So there's sort of that end run around market prognosticating, is sort of that if we can get the collecting principles right, and the theory of price is that price is reflecting an accurate assessment of collecting principles by the community, that sort of, getting the collecting principles right sort of bypasses everything else. But it might take time. My sense of collecting principles might be different than others, but that's why I ground it. I think one helpful way to ground things is in rarity, because rarity it's far harder to disagree about rarity than it is about brand premium or aesthetic design, or those things are eventually become immovable disputes. If well, my card's more beautiful, well, my card's more beautiful. And also, rarity is the area where I think we as collectors bring a unique expertise, because rarity requires understanding, the full menu of card offerings to fully and properly contextualize rarity. And that's where our expertise as collectors comes in. Like, most of us are not art critics. Most of us are not graphic artists. We see what we see. We like most of us. We like what we like. Most of us are not professional photographers. I'm speaking for myself. I am not the proper judge of what is the most beautiful photograph. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. But certainly I would have to defer to the expertise of professional or amateur photographers who are highly skilled in that domain, who could say, well, this is a great photograph and here's why. Same thing for the design of cards. I certainly know which cards I like, what they look like. I certainly know which ones I don't like, how they look, but I am not an art critic. I'm not an art historian. I'm not a graphic artist. But where I do have an expertise, where we all have expertise as collectors that others don't have, is that I do understand, and I do have a passion for it. I do appreciate the full assembly of products of cards and lineages of cards and rarity, and what these cards meant at different points historically to their catalogs, and sort of lineages connecting products to other products, and so on and so forth. So rarity is an area where, as a collector, I can bring to bear expertise that others don't have. Anyway, I'm trying to thread a needle there, which is that what things look like matters, and I should like what they look like. But where my particular expertise is going to shine, and where collecting principles are really going to shine, is in understanding the relationship and the interconnectedness of products, of sets, and rarity is just such an integral part of that. So, all right. So there's the project that Cajun sketched, and there's some background on my approach. And so what I did was I decided I was going to call my ranking of these Cajun cards the Rare Air ranking. And I called it that because the goal of this project is to rank Michael Jordan's hierarchy cards according to their rarity, rather than their market value, rather than the beauty of their design, or rather than collector demand. So I'm coming in and I'm saying, I'm using rarity. I am going to use rarity to make a list that ranks the hierarchy cards. And then let's see how it stacks up against current market prices and beauty and so on and so forth. And so I go on to sort of explain here, rarity isn't quite as simple as how many copies exist. That's a big factor, but it's not the only one. The other part of the rarity equation is firsts. Something that comes first has a claim to be rare as well. For example, rookie cards, even in high quantities, have the rarity of being the only cards from a player's first pro season, assuming that's how you define rookie. The same logic extends to other first appearances too. So this ranking system is going to give credit to three things. And these three things all have to do with rarity. Having fewer copies. In other words, being rarer on the level of print run. Being released earlier. In other words, having chronological rarity. And then third and finally, being the first in a lineage, or lineage rarity. Being the first to appear in a lineage of things. So there's three different types of rarity there that I've broken out. There's print run rarity, there's chronological rarity, and then there's lineage rarity. And then I always add the caveat that this list is not designed to be a final statement on how these cards should be ranked. It's just a fresh way of looking at the hierarchy. And so then here's actually the rules of this system. And so I came up with a rule system that will rank all the hierarchy cards using the principles that I just sketched. And this rule system will be evenly applied. So I will not come in and sort of manually adjust and sort of say, well, okay, so the rules said this, but then I'm going to tweak this a little bit so this card comes up a little higher. No, I come up with a system of rules. I apply it to every card. And then however the result comes out, that's the result. So there's 5 rules here. There's 2 threshold requirements, and there's 3 rules that rank. So there's the 2 threshold requirements for this. Number 1, looking at Cajun's full hierarchy, the full Cajun hierarchy of Michael Jordan cards. And like Cajun has done plenty of exposition on what that means, but in a nutshell, Cajun's hierarchy of Michael Jordan cards is their 80s and 90s cards, no autograph or memorabilia cards, and there are very few autograph memorabilia cards of Michael Jordan, but there are a few that are, and some of them are phenomenal, very, very in demand cards, like the game jersey autograph card out of 23, which doesn't make this list. But there's not very many memorabilia or autograph Michael Jordan cards, but those did get excluded. And also Cajun excludes one of ones. And once again, Michael Jordan doesn't have very many 90s one of ones, but those are excluded too. So then you basically get a Cajun hierarchy, which is not one of ones, not patch, not autograph, cards from the 80s and the 90s of Jordan. And, these are the cards that are very visible. I mean, like, once we sort of see what cards end up getting ranked here, we'll recognize them. You're talking about PMGs, Ruby, Star Rubies, Super Rave, stuff like that. So that's the world of cards that we're living in, the Cajun hierarchy world of cards. Within that world, these are the requirements for me to sort of make sure that I focus in on the cards I want to focus in on, and make sure that we're dealing with cards that lend themselves to the measurements of rarity in the first place. First requirement is that the card must be serial numbered. And then I explain, this is just my personal preference. I like serial numbered cards, and it provides a reliable method of determining print run, which is very important. So the card must be serial numbered. I just like it. I just like when cards have the number printed. And then number 2, the card must be beautiful. Okay, so this is like sort of me saying, I'm not an art critic. I'm not an art historian. I'm not a professional photographer. But if the card is ugly, keep it out. I could probably learn to appreciate the beauty of certain things that I'm sort of ignorant of and not capable of understanding totally, but if somebody could maybe show me, and I could come to appreciate it. I could also maybe come to appreciate how something that I think is beautiful, I might be looking at it sort of the wrong way. I'm willing to admit that I can be wrong on those levels, but if I just flat out think that a card is not beautiful, that's a non-starter, at least for the purpose of this list. Now, what's nice is that actually doesn't end up ruling anything out. But I like to keep that. I like to preserve the ability to rule cards out on that basis. If a card is just hideous, if it's just an atrocity to the eye, that I can. But anyway, that doesn't apply here. Fortunately, I like the aesthetics of nearly every card in the hierarchy, and I definitely like the aesthetics of all the cards that ended up have a serial number and therefore qualified. So no problem there. And then so then we get to the ranking system, and in the ranking system, these are the actual rules that then end up getting applied to rank cards. So rule number 1 for ranking: the rarer the better. So a rarer card ranks higher than a less rare card. So a card that is numbered to 50 actually ranks twice as high as a card that's numbered to 100. So the rarity is like a copy for copy basis. If there's 50 copies of something that is viewed as being twice as rare as something that has 100 copies, and that rarity, the ranking system perfectly mirrors that rarity. So something twice as rare gets ranked twice as high, and you can scale that down. Something 1.5x as rare will get ranked 1.5 times as high. Something 10 times as rare will get ranked 10 times as high, and so forth. But that's not it. So that's just the first of the 3 types of rarity. That's print run rarity. The second type of rarity is the chronological rarity. And so here's how that works. The earlier the season of release, the better. Or the earlier the season of release, the higher rank a card gets. So how does that work out? So the full span of serial numbered cards in the hierarchy is just 4 seasons. There's just 4. So even though this covers Michael Jordan cards from the 80s and the 90s, there's just 4 seasons of serial numbered hierarchy cards. 96, 97, that's the first season. 97, 98 is the second. 98, 99 is the third. And 99, 2000 is the fourth. Just 4. So this whole project end up getting zoomed into just the 4 years of hierarchy cards that have serial numbers. So there's only really a need to figure out how to rank cards that come from these 4 seasons that exist, these 4. So here's how I work this out. And some, you can dispute exactly which, just like in the first instance where I was sort of saying that a card that's out of 50 gets valued as twice as rare and thus ranks twice as high as a card that's numbered to 100, you might say that's putting too much emphasis. Say maybe, you know, the sure, a rarer card should be ranked higher, but it shouldn't be one for one. You can dispute that, and just like here, you can dispute this too. But here's how I came up with it. So 1999-2000 is the last of the 4 seasons. So it is going to, a card that is from that season gets no boost. It doesn't get any advantage. It's the baseline. So if you have a card that has 100 copies, it's serial number to 100, and it's from the final year in the sequence, it's from 1999-2000, then its rarity, it has 100 copies. It is treated as if it has a rarity of 100. Now, if the card is from 1998-99, so now it's from a year earlier than the baseline year, we're going to treat that as 2.3 times as rare as a card from the year earlier. Where did I come up with 2.3 times? I just made it up. I just came up with it because it's Michael Jordan, 2.3. You could, that's his jersey number. You could do 2, you could do 5. I mean, you can tweak this. You can play with it as you see fit. But I came up with 2.3. So a card being from 1 year earlier than the baseline gets treated as 2.3 times as rare. So if a card is from 1998-99, it is seen relative to a card from 1999-2000. If it is numbered to 100, it's as if it were numbered to 43. It's seen as 2.3 times as rare. So chronological rarity is being valued highly in this system. Okay, so in other words, this system is saying on the chronological rarity scale, a card from 98-99 numbered to 100 is equal to if a card from 1999-2000 was numbered to 43. Does that make? I hope that makes sense. That the earlier in the chronology of these releases, the earlier a card is, the more its rarity counts. So let's keep going. Now, what if a card is from 97-98, which is the second earliest of the 4 seasons in this chronology within the serial numbered hierarchy? If that's the case, the card is treated as 4.5 times as rare as a card from the baseline or the last season. And once again, where did 4.5 come from? That's just a different Michael Jordan jersey number. Nothing too crazy there. Just I needed a multiplier. Why not? So here's how that works out. So a card from 1997-98 that's numbered to 100 relative to a card from 1999-2000, which is the baseline season, it's as if it was numbered to 22. So a card from 1997-98 that has 100 copies is treated as equally rare to a copy from 1999-2000 that had 22 copies. Okay, so coming from 97-98 gets a 4.5x rarity multiplier. And if this is sounding a little extreme, whatever, just granted, it might, but wait until you see how it unfolds in application, because we're going to go through the list that this spits out. And then finally, if the card is from 1996-97, the card is treated as having a 7.2x rarity multiplier relative to the 1999-2000 baseline season. And where did 7.2x come from? 72 wins. 72 wins for the greatest Bulls team. And so the mathematical application of that is a card from 1996-97 that has 100 copies is treated as having an equivalent rarity as a card from 1999-2000 that had 14 copies. All right, that's the 7.2x multiplier benefit that a card gets for being from 1996-97, which is within the Cajun hierarchy. That's the first year of serial number Michael Jordan cards. All right, so that's how the mechanics of that work out. And then finally, we have the third rule, which is firsts in a lineage get a bump or get a raise. So if a card is a first of a type that appears across multiple seasons, in other words, a lineage. So a lineage must be a type of card that appears across multiple seasons. If a card is a first of that type, then it gets a 2.3x rarity multiplier. So the identified types are PMGs, legacy collections, and row 0, 1, and 2 are each treated as their own type. And you might say, well, what about row 3? Well, row 3 doesn't form a lineage. Row 3 only appears in 97-98. The other 3 rows appear across 2 seasons, therefore creating a lineage. The one of a kind is another type that gets the status of being a lineage because it appears across multiple seasons. Rave, Super Rave, Star Rubies, and the Platinum Medallions. And just to reiterate, the definition of a first of a type is Michael Jordan's earliest appearing card from the earliest season of that type. All right, so to make that concrete, let's take the example of the 1997-98 Star Rubies. So there is a Star Rubies in 1997-98. There is a Rubies in 1996-97, but it's not serial numbered, and it's actually called Rubies or known as Rubies, and Star Rubies is something slightly different. 1997-98 has the first appearance of the Star Rubies. 1998-99 has the second appearance of the Star Rubies. And then within 1997-98, there are two different Michael Jordan Star Rubies cards in the same Skybox Premium base set. There is the earlier appearing standard base set card, and then there is the later appearing Team Skybox subset card. And so within 1997, so first of all, we've established that there's a lineage across those two seasons. Within the first season of that lineage, the first appearing Michael Jordan card is the traditional base card because it appears first in the base set. So that is the one that gets the first premium. And then, I had ChatGPT help me to turn that into a formula that applies to all the cards. And then, all right, so now we're going to run through. So remember, Cajun said pick 23. So I developed this formula, and then I took every serial numbered Cajun card, of which I think there were 63. There ended up being 63 Michael Jordan cards within the Cajun hierarchy that were serial numbered and were beautiful, but I didn't exclude anything for lack of beauty. So there were 63 cards I had to document their features of. I had to document their season. I had to document their print run. And then I had to document whether or not they belonged to a lineage. And if they did, if they were a first of a type. And then I plugged all that information into the formula, and then I allowed it to rank the cards. And here is how that ranking worked out. And I'll let me increase the zoom here to make the images a little bit nicer to look at for those who are watching along on YouTube. Okay. So even though Cajun said 23, this list created a three-way tie at 22nd. So it technically has 24 cards. So, one of these can be an honorable mention, I guess. But there is a three-way tie for 22nd. And the cards that ended up tying for 22nd are the Superpowers Quantum Gold out of 50 from 98 Upper Deck, the 98 Star Rubies out of 50, and the 98 PMG out of 50. And so it's pretty easy to see how these all ended up getting the same score and how they all ended up tied. It's because they're all from 98. None of them are the first of a lineage, and they're all numbered to 50. So those three end up being in three-way tie for 22nd. And the shocking thing about this, obviously, is the Superpowers card. Like, people are super familiar with the PMG Champ and the Star Rubies out of 50, but the Superpowers, it's like, there's not a lot of awareness for the Superpowers insert set from 98 Upper Deck. But along the dimensions of rare, I believe that card was in Cajun's tier 4. But along the dimensions of rarity, using these the three different aspects of rarity that I use to rank these cards, there it is. Number 21 is the Molten Metal Fusion Titanium out of 40. That card comes from an insert set of 98-99, and it ranks slightly ahead of its previous cards because it's a bit rare. It's out of 40. It's not the first of a lineage, but and it comes from 98-99. But 40 copies slightly rarer than 50. So there it lives. Up next is the Gold Embossed Refractor numbered to 74. So it is less rare than any of the cards that are ranked below it, but it gets that earlier season bump. It gets, because it's from 97-98, it gets a slight edge. It comes in at 20th. In 19th is the Credentials out of in 19th is the Essential Credentials Future out of 72 of Jordan. So the Golden Boss Refractors out of 74. This one's out of 72. And also not the Essential Credentials for Michael Jordan is not, it doesn't gather the first in a lineage because it does, the credentials for Michael Jordan didn't appear. The Essential Credentials did not appear across multiple seasons. There is a Credentials out of 499, but it's, I drew the distinction between the Credentials out of 499 versus the Essential Credentials Future and Now that came the year later. And also even if we did combine those into forming a lineage, this wouldn't be the first in a lineage anyway. Then comes the 1997-98 Stadium Club One of a Kind, number to 150. But this one is a card that benefits from being the first in a lineage, because there's the 97-98 One of a Kind, and then there is the 98-99 One of a Kind. So it gets the first of a lineage benefit, even though it has 150 copies. It also benefits from coming from 97-98. And we'll just keep going here. I'm not going to explain sort of like I've taken some time there to sort of explain how these cards landed where they land, having applied the formula here. I'm not going to do that for every card. Hopefully that exercise can sort of help fill in why things ranked where they ranked, and rest assured I've double checked the formula to make sure that it properly ranked everything and nothing was overlooked, although still there's always a chance of a mistake. So then the next we get to after the One of a Kind, there's a three-way tie for 15th. And that tie exists between the PMG Champ, the Grand Finale, and Team Skybox. Three-way tie for 15th there. Then we get up to 11th, and there's a four-way tie for 11th that ends up gathering the Michael Jordan. So there's the Aerodynamics Gold out of 25. There is the Intensity Gold out of 25, or Quantum Gold out of 25. There's the Super Rave, numbered to 25, the 1998-99 Super Rave. And there's the SPX Finite, numbered to 25. Probably some surprising results right there. And that's what's so interesting about sort of contrasting Rarity against the consensus, the price-based consensus, is that Rarity is bringing some cards to the table that I certainly had overlooked prior to assembling this list. The Intensity Gold, the Aerodynamics Gold, again, those are inserts from 98-99 Upper Deck, 25 copies apiece. Of course, the Super Rave is a little more well-known from 98-99. And then the SPX Finite, the Spectrum. So card number 201 of Michael Jordan, the SPX Finite Spectrum. I believe that's actually the fourth appearing base card of Michael Jordan in the SPX set from 98-99. But there it is, because sheerly on the strength of its rarity and coming from the 98-99 season. Then we get to the Platinum Medallion from 97-98. That comes in 10th. In a three-way tie for 7th, we end up getting the Flair Showcase Legacy Collections, number to 150 from the first year from 96-97. So it's fascinating how high those score, given that they're numbered 150, but they are getting the boost from being from the first season of serial number Jordan cards in the hierarchy. That they come from that their chronological rarity is high, and they also all benefit from being first in a lineage. So this is the first row 0 lineage, this is the first row 1 lineage, and this is the first row 2 lineage within the legacy collection. So they don't have the print run rarity of some of the cards that surround them, but they do have the chronological rarity, and they do have the first in a lineage rarity. Then you get up to card number 6. PMG Red comes in number 6. So the PMG Red has 90 copies. It is benefiting from coming from 97-98, so it's from the second season, so it's getting chronological rarity bump, and it's also getting a first in a lineage bump. And so this is maybe controversial. So I treated the PMG Red and the Green as being equal in terms of being the first in a lineage, because 97-98 Metal Universe PMGs, the first in the lineage of PMGs are these. They were the PMG Championship product chronologically was released after the original Metal Universe product. So these two share a claim to being the first PMGs, but somebody could make an argument that, okay, well, there's 100 PMGs in the first PMG set in the lineage, but the Green is actually the first 10 copies. the green is the first, and the red is the last 90 copies. At least I'm pretty sure that's how it works for all the players. Although there is like some example, like Charles Barkley or something like that. Maybe there's anyway, but for Jordan, certainly for Jordan, the reds are the last 90 and the greens are the first 10. So you might say, well, if we zoom in a little bit more, we really should say that the greens are the first in the lineage and the reds are the second in the lineage and the champ is the third in the lineage. But for the purpose of this exercise, I decided, because the Michael Jordan card itself that these two parallels exist for, it's the same card within that set. I decided to treat both those parallels as sort of having a co-equal right to being the first in a lineage. But I can see the other side there. I can see a person taking the approach of, well, it should only be the green. The red shouldn't be considered first in a lineage too. But because I have treated the red as belonging to a first in a lineage, that helped give it an edge and help bring it up to the top 6. Because if it didn't have the first in a lineage, it would have scored lower. Then we get to a two-way tie for 4th, and it's just both of the cards from 97, 98 that are firsts in a lineage and that are numbered to 50. So it's the first Star Rubies Jordan, and it's the first Super Rave Jordan. So the first Star Rubies, the first Super Rave, they get a benefit from being from the second year in the chronological rarity. They get a benefit from being first in in-lineage, and they have a really low print run too at 50. Card number 3 is the starting 5, has just 5 copies. Card number 2 is the essential credentials. Is the essential credentials now, which is numbered to 9. And so comparing the cards number 2 and number 3 is instructive, because the essential credentials now is numbered to 9, but it's from 97. The hoop starting 5 is numbered to only 5, but it's from 98. So that chronological rarity is what gives the essential credentials a slight edge in the scoring system over the starting 5 and allows it to come into second. And then coming in first is the PMG green. It is the first of the PMG type. It is numbered to 10. It is from 1997-98. And so within the Cajun hierarchy, you get a pretty intuitive ranking. The PMG green ends up coming up on top. The essential credentials now ends up coming in second. Starting 5 is high. Probably people aren't going to have that as high. And, they might be using some of their subjective preference. They don't really love the way it looks, or they're not super high on hoops for its brand premium. So that one is probably an outlier on most lists. But generally speaking, as you sort of scroll this list, rarity is quite predictive of consensus. Rarity ends up being quite predictive of price and how market price ends up playing out in the market for these cards. So using the Cajun hierarchy and then using this sort of rarity filter, or using this rarity algorithm to rank the cards, ends up spitting out a pretty common sense list. And so a different way that I organized this information was, so Cajun has broken his hierarchy into tiers, and tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. Tier 4 being the lowest of those tiers, and tier 1 being the highest. And of the 24 cards that I ranked here, or that made my top 24 using the rare air ranking, 16 came from tier 1. So there's quite a lot of overlap between sort of Cajun's tier system and how Rarity ended up ranking these cards. And the cards that are super interesting to me here are the ones that Cajun, through the hierarchy, ranked in tier 4, but that ended up making my top 24. And in some cases scoring quite high. So cards like the 1998-99 Upper Deck Intensity Quantum Gold out of 25 and the Aerodynamics Quantum Gold out of 25, those ended up being tied for 11th using the rare air ranking system. Those ended up ahead of cards like Grand Finale and PMG Champ and Team Skybox Rubies and so on and so forth. Those ended up scoring really, really high, even though those, I think, this is no dispute with Cajun's tiers. I think Cajun's tiers did a really nice job of reflecting community consensus. But here's a great example of, zooming in on something like Rarity and sort of using it to say, well, if we hyper focus on the collecting principle of Rarity, it's identifying some places where, there's a disagreement, and that is quite interesting. And so sort of like if we do take, so let's take the subjective approach here now. So let's sort of see how would we massage this information given what we know about sort of like the collectors factor in other things like brand premium and aesthetics and stuff. And so it's like sort of like looking like, let's just look at the intensity card for a second here. It's this blue one here. So it comes from Upper Deck. I don't think there's any brand premium knock for coming from Upper Deck. In fact, Upper Deck and Michael Jordan, those brands are intertwined quite strongly. Also, if we're going to use the price mechanism as a way of reflecting brand premium demand, the game jersey autograph card from Michael Jordan comes from Upper Deck. So, and in fact, the most of Michael Jordan's most expensive cards come from the Upper Deck brand or from the Upper Deck manufacturer and sub brands like the Exquisite Collection brand. So I don't think there's any brand premium issue here with Upper Deck. And then I look at the aesthetic side of things. I look at this intensity card. I actually love, there's things going on here that I love. I love die cut. Die cut's not for everybody. I love die cut. One of the reasons why is because there is something nostalgic about it. I remember opening packs, and that when you had a die cut card in the pack, everything there was a rush of excitement. It felt different. It's like, oh, there's something different in here. And I also love the aesthetics of die cut. I think it looks nice. Not all die cut cards look nice, but I think this has a pretty nice die cut aesthetic. I think the die cut plays quite nicely with the cards design. And again, I'm not a professional graphic designer, so I'm giving my just saying things that I like, but this is certainly not a sophisticated opinion on graphic design. I love, though, as another personal preference, I love when the design integrates lines. I love the use of lines in a design, and like I think lines are used really nicely here. I think the cropped shot of Jordan is nice. I just think this is a really nice looking card. So I don't think there's an aesthetic penalty here that this card suffers from at all. I also really like when serial numbers are on the front of a card. So I love the fact that its rarity is displayed boldly on the card's front. And it's gold. It's gold foil. I think I used a copy of the number to 75 rather than a 25. So the foil isn't gold in the picture that I'm showing you, but you can imagine that foil being gold instead. And gold foil is fantastic. Card looks great. Comes from a great brand. I don't know. What's the knock on this card? What's wrong with this card? So that's how this exercise can be super instructive. And those were some of the most shocking and interesting takeaways were cards like the aerodynamics and the intensity gold, and the SPX finite spectrum certainly was interesting. But then I started looking up the price history of it, and I noticed that card already sells really high anyway. The legacy collections from the 96-97 come out scoring really high, but maybe you feel there's too much emphasis being put on chronological rarity, and maybe they'll score too high. But really interesting list. All right, let me take a swig of my water. And let's wrap this up. So now we're going to move to the third and final segment. And this is what ultimately prompted this whole episode. This is what it was all been building to. This was a comment from a fellow collector who I'll just shout out Tony, so that that's shout out to Tony, who reached out to me and sort of planted the seed. So he saw the Cajun episode, which I highly suggest people go watch. I love the list that Frankie came up with. Josh's list is excellent. Brian's list and Josh's list were very similar. Brian's list was great. Like I said, I love hearing collectors go through their thought process. And so the lists are really cool. It was a really fun episode to record. But so Tony watched and he was like, but I know that, so you were playing within the rules of the Cajun hierarchy, and that's great. But what if you brought in the one of ones that you've been focusing on lately? And I sort of think he was making a connection. He was sort of seeing like, okay, so Chris, I'm laying out sort of one way of approaching collecting Michael Jordan cards using rarity as a North Star, and sort of seeing how that rarity ended up. If we use rarity as the North Star, how does it rank Jordan cards? And he said, okay, well, I can. All right. So now so I see you actually, you think rarity is pretty important, and that logically leads to landing on one of ones. But the rarity has multiple aspects. Print run of one is just one aspect of rarity. You have these other aspects of rarity. You have the chronological rarity, you have the first in a lineage rarity. So Tony, he was curious, how would the one of ones rank if we put them through the ranking process? So I took the formula and I expanded it. Or not that I kept the formula the same. I expanded the inputs. I included in the inputs those 63 serial numbered hierarchy cards, and then I added in all of the one of ones that fall within the same time span that the hierarchy applies to. So here's what I mean. So we're doing the same thing, same Cajun hierarchy, except now there's a wrinkle, which is Michael Jordan one of ones from 1999-2000 season and earlier can be included. Now, I technically don't really. I think there's an argument to be made that 1999-2000 is not quite 90s, so I'm not. So like. Anyway, that's an aside. But so the reason why I've allowed one of ones from 1999-2000 and earlier to come in is simply because that's the Cajun hierarchy cutoff. The Cajun hierarchy cuts off at 99-2000, so that's we'll let in one of ones from 1999-2000 and earlier. And then a few notes. In order to be brought in, the one of ones must be stamped one of one. So this ends up excluding the 90s Stadium Club printing plates, which are print run one, but they never got stamped one of one. And then autograph and memorabilia cards are excluded, which is also, the one of ones, memorabilia or autograph one of ones are excluded. And this ends up excluding just a handful of one of ones, only from 1999-2000. So 97-98 one of ones, none of them have autographs or memorabilia pieces. 1998-99 one of ones, none of those have autographs or memorabilia pieces, but there are a few from 1999-2000 that are one of ones that have autographs and memorabilia pieces. Those end up getting excluded. So there's just a few one of ones that do end up getting lopped off because of the no autograph, no memorabilia policy, but they're all from 99-2000. All right. So we've already gone over the rules. The only new rule that comes in, or the only further explanation or caveats that need to be added, are these. First, multiple versions of one of ones are pooled together. Okay. So what I mean by that is this. If a card has multiple versions, and I put versions in quotation marks, but I'll give you an example. So like on the most recent episode, I think, of the HOJ-Cast, we talked about the first ever commemorative one of one Michael Jordans, which I refer to as the Quantum Gold one of ones from 1998-99 Upper Deck. So they're all one of ones, and they are all true one of ones, and they are all one of ones. There are no other one of one parallels to them. But they are all versions of each other in a sense. They all sort of have a very similar design. They all belong to the same set. They're all of the same player. Granted, they have different numbers. But so, in an act of sort of in sort of a concession, So the concession would be that let's err on the side of not overemphasizing their rarity. Let's err on the opposite side. So let's say that, like, for example, with those Quantum Golds, there are 30 of them. Even though they're all true one of ones, they all have a different card number, they all have a different action shot, they all have a different caption on the backside. Let's treat those for this in an act of generosity and benevolence towards non-one of one cards. Let's treat those, for the purpose of this rarity exercise, as if they were numbered to 30 each. Okay? Treat them as if they were members out of 30, even though they're all one of ones. But we can also see the argument that, well, they're all one of ones, yes. They're all unique cards, yes. But they come from this group of 30. So let's treat them as if they are one of 30 for the purpose of this rarity exercise. Okay. So I think that's fair. I think it's a fair way that rarity can account for the fact that we have these commemorative or multiple Michael Jordan card sets. And even though they're all one of ones, but there are multiple versions of them, sort of, even though they're all different numbers, but sort of that sort of accounts for the rarity. That's rarity's way of accounting for the fact that these are a little bit atypical, because even though they're Quantum Gold one of ones, and they're one of ones, but there's in a sense they're one of 32. Like, it's not quite It's not totally fair either to call them out of 30, frankly, because they're all one of ones. But let's just err on the side of extreme caution. Let's err on the side of not giving too much credit to one of ones, especially in the context of the Michael Jordan market, where one of ones have been historically overlooked, and that the market doesn't place a very big premium on Michael Jordan one of ones. That let's err on the side of not giving one of ones too much rarity credit. Let's give them a little less rarity credit than they probably deserve. And then the rules and ranking, we've already gone over these. The only thing that I'll add is that in the lineage rarity component, so remember briefly, just a quick recap, there's the three types of rarity. There's the print run rarity, which the one of ones are going to score very high on. They're all one of ones. There's the, except for, well, they're all one of ones, except I just got done explaining that plenty of them will belong to like the quantum golds. They'll be treated as out of 30. But that's what we understand, the print run rarity aspect of things. We understand the chronological rarity. The earlier the season, the better in terms of the ranking. And then the lineage. There are three lineages that the one of ones introduce. So the Ultra Masterpiece is a lineage that gets introduced because it exists in 1997-98 and it exists in 1998-99. So you have multiple seasons of this lineage. So the Ultra Masterpiece lineage gets introduced. The Upper Deck Power Deck lineage gets introduced. There's an Upper Deck Power Deck one of one of Jordan from 97-98, and then there are three Power Deck one of ones of Jordan from 1999-2000. So multiple seasons of the Power Deck one of one, that creates a lineage. And then the Checklist Golds also get a lineage. 1998-99 offers up gold checklist one of ones, and then 1999-2000 offers up gold checklist one of ones, and they all belong to the Upper Deck flagship. So three lineages created: the Ultra Masterpiece, the Upper Deck Power Deck one of one, and the Upper Deck checklist gold one of one. So three lineages get introduced. And remember that something being the first in a lineage provides that card a rarity bump, the lineage rarity. But the formula and its calculation is exactly the same. And so now let's go through this list. And this ended up resulting in, now there's 96 cards that end up getting ranked here. 96 cards end up getting ranked in once we bring in the one of ones. And remember, like it was mentioned above, that the one of ones that belong to a group, that can be seen as having versions, like the 30 quantum gold one of ones, those are, for the purpose of this, those are treated as one card out of 30. Those are treated as one card having 30 versions, so they're treated as out of 30. And also, I expanded this. So like Cajun said, only 24, only rank the top 23 cards. And I ended up having 24 because of the tie 22nd. So for this, I ended up saying, well, you know what? Why don't I just rank all of them? Why don't instead of just focusing on 23, how about I rank all the serial numbered cards and all the one of ones? So that's how this worked. So, and once again, let me increase the zoom so the images of the cards are a little bit easier to see. So we start off in 96th with Diamond Dimensions out of 2000. I don't even think I'm going to take the time really to name all these, but if you're watching, you can sort of watch the scroll. There's takeit2.net, which is number 2,000. That's 95th. Grade 8. 93rd ends up being the High Voltage 500. And so High Voltage 500, obviously, it's a great Michael Jordan card. But it ends up getting here relegated to 93rd. And the reason for that is because sometimes we can forget, from the point of view of rarity, it has 500 copies. But I think the astute Michael Jordan collector will be quick to point out that while it is numbered to 500, there seem to be hundreds and hundreds fewer copies than 500 in circulation. And so that's something that impacts many Michael Jordan cards, but especially ones from hoops and lower end brands. That especially it seems for those that at least from population reports, far fewer than their serial number to print run actually exist. We come up to 91st. We have a two-way tie in 91st. that two-way tie is between BAMs out of 250 and Molten Metal Fusion out of 250. Those cards are both numbered to 250. They both come from 98.99. Neither of them is the first in a lineage, so we get that. We have this five-way tie in 85th that brings in some of these 1999, 2000 upper deck inserts. I'm sorry, that I should have said a five-way tie for 86th. I'm not sure if that's what I said, but anyway, then we get to 85th. 85th is when the first one of one shows up. And it is the 1999-2000 Athlete of the Century Platinum one of ones. And so there are 90 of these. Michael Jordan, there are 90 different one of ones. So this is essentially a card from 1999-2000 that has 90 copies. That's how this card is being treated from the point of view of rarity. And there are 90 copies from 1999-2000, which is the baseline, the last season in terms from the point of view of chronological rarity. So there's no chronological rarity bump. The print run is seen as if it were out of 90. There's no first in a lineage bump. So that's the first one of ones coming there in 85th and 83rd sitting. I guess I made a bit of I've made a counting error here. But I can fix this live on the fly. Okay, that was just a simple counting mistake. Okay, so in 84th, right above the platinum one of ones from Athlete of the Century, right above that in 84th comes the Z-Force Rave, the Superman, numbered to 399. Above that comes the Credentials, the 1996 EX2000 Credentials, numbered to 499. That one getting a big bump, even though it has 499 copies, it gets a bump because it's coming from the point of view of chronological rarity. It's coming from the first season of serial number Jordan one of ones, 1996-97. Then we've got a two-way tie in 81st. We've got the second one of a kind, and we have right there with it, we have the second Rave from Skybox Thunder, both numbered to 150. I'm just going to do a little scroll here. Keep scrolling. Okay, so here's something interesting that we'll stop on. So tied for 73rd. So I just skipped over some cards. Please watch the video, pause it if you kind of want to see some of the stuff that I skipped over. But coming up in a five-way tie for 73rd, we have Playmakers Theater, Slam Bams, Topps Gold Label, Red Label, Star Quest Gold, and Premium Choice Reserve. And so from the point of view of this rare air filter or this rare air algorithm, these cards all tie. They're all from 1998-99. They're all numbered to 100. None of them are the first in a lineage. So here they are. They all come together, and it makes for an interesting mix. And again, drawing on the point that I made earlier about the high voltage 500, experienced Michael Jordan collectors will note that these cards in circulation seem to be much rarer than their out of 100 print run. And looking at population reports, cards like the Premium Choice Reserve and the Star Quest Gold have much, much, much fewer than 100 copies that have ever been graded. Far fewer. But this is an interesting cluster, and the one that really stands out is the Topps let me make sure I just say its name properly. The Topps Gold Label, Red Label out of 100 from 1998-99. That's a base set parallel. Looks nice. Believe it is the rarest version of that card. So interesting cluster there. All right, we'll keep going. Then we get to another one of one set in 70th. In 70th is the one of one set known as Jordan's Greatest Hits from Ultimate Victory. So there are 30 of those, and that's why this Michael Jordan card lives there. These come from 1999-2000. So this is essentially a Michael Jordan card. Even though these are all one of ones, these are being treated as a Michael Jordan card that has 30 copies, come from 1999-2000, with and no first in a lineage, since it doesn't extend across multiple seasons. So these are beautiful. These are really, really stunning cards. These are some of the most beautiful, shiny cards to come out from Upper Deck's manufacturing facilities. And these are aesthetically, these are popular among people who have held them in hand or seen them before. But yeah, so there's another one of one that cracks the list in 70th. Then we get up to a tie for 68th, which is the two classic 61s. So these are not benefiting from any sort of first in a lineage. And chronological rarity, they get a small boost for being from 98-99 rather than 99-2000. And then print run rarity, each of them is numbered to 61. And I suppose there's an argument that they could be treated as versions of each other, and then really the print run of them should be treated as 122. There is an argument for that, but I kept them as two separate cards. But I don't know. That's up for debate. Should they be lumped in? Should they be lumped together? And I'll use this also to say there is an argument also that should the Flair Showcase Legacies be lumped together? Because if you do lump them together, it's sort of being three versions, like for the 96-97, it's sort of being three versions of each other. Then they're not each, three separate cards out of 150, but they're lumped together to be one type of card out of 450. That would obviously dramatically impact where they rank. All right, 63rd presents an interesting five-way tie between 5 Jordan inserts from 1999-2000 Upper Deck that are all numbered to 25. So History Class, Jamboree, Now Showing, Star Surge, and Wild. The rarest version of each of those is out of 25, and those end up ranking 63rd, which is pretty cool. In 62nd comes the 1999-2000 Master Collection one of ones. There are 23 of those one of ones, so those are treated as being out of 23 for the purpose of this experiment. Then we get up to 55th, and in 55th, you get a big tie. You get a tie between all 4 of the Legacy collections, row 0, 1, 2, and 3 from 97-98. And you get SP Authentic Profiles, number 2-100. You get Platinum Medallion, number 2-100, and you get Diamond Dimensions, number 2-100. And so what all these have in common is they're number 2-100. They are from 1997-98, and there they are. All right, and I'm just reflecting for a second here. So the Platinum Medallion is hanging out right here. But it should be getting a benefit for being the first in a lineage. And I just figured out what the problem is. Okay, I have the wrong image here. The image that should be here is for the 98 greats. So I'll make a note to myself to fix that later, but I'm just deleting it for the purpose of looking at this. Let's I included the wrong image here. The Platinum Medallion that should be pictured here is the 98 greats, because it is not the first in a lineage. So sorry, I have the wrong image there. So just imagine that the 98 greats Platinum Medallion out of 100 is there alongside the Diamond Dimensions and all these other ones. So the what this group has in common is these are 97 98s, not firsts of a lineage, number 2-100. All right, and then we get up to the tie for 52nd. We've already been over these cards. The PMG Champ, or I'm sorry, the PMG from 98-99, sometimes called the PMG Gold, the 98-99 Star Rubies, and the 98-99 Superpowers Upper Deck insert. Each of those numbered to 50. Then we get to 51st. Here comes another one of one, rearing its head. It is from 1999-2000 Upper Deck. These are the Heir of Greatness one of ones. It's a 20-card subset. So these are being treated as if there are 20 of them. And so here those land. Those 20 land here in 51st. And 50th, edging those out, is the Molten Metal Fusion Titanium out of 40. We've already talked about that. We've already talked about plenty of these. Here comes a few more one of ones. So in 46th come those Quantum Golds. The Quantum Golds from 1998-99 Upper Deck, Michael Jordan. Those are treated as if they are out of 30 from 1998-99 Upper Deck. And then above them is a different group of 1-of-1s, the higher power gold 1-of-1s. So there are just 12 of those, but they come from 1999-2000. So they get no chronological rarity boost. They get no lineage boost. They just are simply seen as something from 1999-2000 that has 12 copies. Then we've already been through these. We get to tied for 42nd. We have Grand Finale, Team Skybox, Star Rubies, and the PMG Champ. We've also talked about these at length. Then tied in 38th, we have the Intensity Gold out of 25, the Aerodynamics Gold out of 25, the Super Rave out of 25, and the SPX Finite Spectrum out of 25. Then in 35th, we get a 3-way tie between 3 different 1-of-1 sets. So the first two, well, actually, let me go in the other direction. So of these 3 1-of-1 sets are the following: 1999-2000 NBA Legends. The best is a subset. It's a 10-card subset. So this is a 1999-2000, no lineage premium, no chronological rarity advantage. This is just from 99-2000, 10-card subset, number to 1-of-1. So those are effectively 1999-2000 cards out of 10. That's how they're treated. Then you have the Diamond Gallery Gold 1-of-1s from 1999-2000 Black Diamond. Once again, that's just there's 10 of those, so those are treated as if they are out of 10. And then you have 1998-99, so now you're getting a chronological rarity bump. You have these 23 cards from the Upper Deck base set, the Alphabet Golds, the 23 Alphabet Golds. These come in a tie for 35th. And, applying, if I were to apply my personal bias, I'm a huge fan of the Alphabet Golds. So, anyway, I haven't gone into nuance in any other cards, really. I'm not going to get into a big nuanced pitch for those either. But like, here is an example. And I'm sure as people look at this, there are plenty of examples where people are like, I want to complement or augment the rarity analysis with more context and applying more of my own, applying other factors or my own personal judgment. So for me, this is one where it's like, I personally rank the Alphabet Golds very high, but through the filter and the lens of rarity, here they are tied in 35th with the Diamond Gallery Golds and with the NBA Legend, the best gold 1-of-1s. Here we are in 34th. This is now where the 97-98 Platinum Medallion comes into play. And it is getting a huge bump as the first of a type or a first of a lineage. It is number 200, but it's the first in the Platinum Medallion, the numbered Platinum Medallion lineage. And it is number 200, and it's from 1997-98, so it's getting a chronological rarity bump. Then we get up to 31st here, and in a 3-way tie for 31st, we get the 3 legacy collections from 96-97. And then we get the PMG Red in 30th. Again, we've talked about these in the ranking I did with Cajun just a few moments ago. Then we get another 1-of-1 set. So here in 29th, we get the 1999-2000 Cool Air Quantum Gold 1-of-1 set. It's 8 cards of Michael Jordan. So these are just treated as a 1999-2000 Michael Jordan card numbered to 8. But they are, in fact, 8 different 1-of-1s. Pretty cool. They look shiny. I've never seen one in hand, but they look shiny. They look really cool. Nice die cut. In 28th, we have from 1999-2000 NBA Legends, History of the Dunk, which is a 5-card subset. So these are treated as if they were a Michael Jordan card numbered to 5 from 1999-2000, even though they're all their own 1-of-1s. Then we've already talked about these. Tied in 26th is the 97-98 Star Rubies and the 97-98 Super Rave, each of those being first of a kind, each of those being numbered to 50. Tied in 24th, we have 2 different things. Okay, so tied in 24th, we have the 1999-2000 Upper Deck Checklist Golds. So in the 1999-2000 Upper Deck flagship base set, there are 3 gold 1-of-1 checklists of Michael Jordan. So those are treated as if they are a Jordan card from 99-2000 that is numbered to 3. And it's tied with the 1999-2000 Upper Deck Power Deck 1-of-1s, of which there are 3 as well. So those also, for the purpose of this rarity exercise, are treated as if they are a 1999-2000 card numbered to 3, even though it's really 3 different 1-of-1s. So the 99-2000 Upper Deck Checklist Golds and the 1999-2000 Upper Deck Power Deck 1-of-1s, those are here in a tie at 24th. 23rd, in 23rd, we get the starting 5. In 22nd, we get the Essential Credentials Now, numbered to 9. Tied in 18th, we have a 4-way tie that introduces 4 more 1-of-1s. And now we're at a level where these 1-of-1s are all the only version of themselves, period. So these are not, there's not like there's they have other versions or whatever. These are all like, these are all true 1-of-1s, as all the 1-of-1s discussed are, but they also don't have any other versions that they can sort of be lumped in with or clustered together with. So here, tied in 18th, we have the 1999-2000 NBA Legends First Team Gold 1-of-1. So First Team is a subset within the 1999-2000 NBA Legends base set. And it's the theme of it is sort of picking the first team, and Michael Jordan is the first team guard. So there are, and he has no other first team cards. So that lands here, the gold 1-of-1. Also from the same base set, the 1999-2000 NBA Legends, this is just the standard base set 1-of-1 of Michael Jordan. It's actually numbered to the first card in the checklist too. The standard base set from NBA Legends, gold 1-of-1. We have the Ultimate Victory 1-of-1, card number 10 from the base set. So we actually discussed earlier the Jordan's Greatest Hits 30 card subset, which also comes from 1999-2000 Ultimate Victory. This standing apart from those cards that are all themed Jordan's Greatest Hits. This is the standard base set card from that same base set. This is card number 10 in that base set. It's the only one of its version. I've never seen, I don't know if anybody's ever seen the gold 1-of-1 of it. So I had to use the image of the number to 100. And then the other one here is the 1999-2000 Upper Deck Retro Platinum 1-of-1, which is card number 1 in its base set. So what we have here at tied for 18th, we have 4 different 1-of-1s that have no other versions that are from 1999-2000. So if you can claim to be for the purpose of this algorithm, so these are not getting any benefit for chronological rarity. These are not getting any benefit for being the first of a lineage. These are strictly riding off the fact that they are being treated as 1-of-1s from 1999-2000, not with no other versions. So these are 1-of-1s. So the print run rarity has elevated these up to being tied in 18th. Sitting above them in 17th is the PMG Green Michael Jordan. Then in 16th is the sitting there in 16th place are the 1998-99 Upper Deck Checklist Golds, of which there are 4. So 1998-99 Upper Deck has 4 Checklist Gold 1-of-1s of Jordan. So this is benefiting from a little bit of chronological rarity because it's from 98-99 rather than 99-2000. It's benefiting from the first in a lineage rarity because we've identified that there are 1999-2000 Upper Deck Checklist Golds, and these are from the year earlier. These are the first in the lineage of Checklist Golds. These are the first Checklist Gold 1-of-1s of Michael Jordan from Upper Deck or from any brand. And these are treated as if there are 4 of them. So these are, even though there's 4 different 1-of-1s, they are being treated as if they have a print run of 4 for this ranking. So that's how those factors balance. The chronological rarity coming from a little bit earlier, being the first in a lineage, just giving them a bump, even though they're not being treated as 1-of-1s, they're being treated as out of 4s. Then tied for 8th is where things start to get really interesting and exciting, and the 1-of-1s now are completely taking over. So tied in 8th are the following Michael Jordan 1-of-1s. The Gem Masters 1-of-1. The SPX Finite Extreme 1-of-1. the Ultra Purple Masterpiece 1 of 1, the Ultra Game Dated Gold 1 of 1. I'm sorry, the Upper Deck. That's not Ultra. Sorry, the Upper Deck Game Dated Gold 1 of 1. The Upper Deck Hard Court Holding Court Gold 1 of 1. Michael Jordan on both sides. The Upper Deck Heart and Soul Gold 1 of 1. Michael Jordan on both sides. The Upper Deck Highway 99 Gold 1 of 1. And the Upper Deck To the Net Gold 1 of 1. So what these 8 cards have in common is this. None of these are firsts in a lineage. None of these, I don't think any of these actually even belong. Well, I guess the Ultra Purple Masterpiece 1 of 1 belongs to a lineage of Ultra Masterpiece 1 of 1s, but it is not the first. So none of these are first in a lineage, so they're nothing's getting a rarity bump there. These all come from 1998-99, so they're getting a little bit of chronological rarity bump. They're all 1 of 1s with no other versions, so they're all getting the bump of being from 98-99 rather than 99-2000. So they're getting the chronological rarity bump, and then they're all 1 of 1s. So they're getting the print run rarity bump. So contrasted against the 1 of 1s that were tied for 18th, which come from 1999-2000, these are all bumped. These are all getting the bump of coming from 1998-99 instead. And so these 8 cards end up being tied for 8th because they're the only version of themselves. They're all 1 of 1s, and they all come from 98-99. Tied in third, we have 5 cards. Tied in third, we have all 4 of the Legacy Collection 1 of 1s of Michael Jordan, row 0, 1, 2, and 3. Those each have a Masterpiece 1 of 1 edition. And so none of those are first in a lineage, so they're not getting any bump there. And none of those but they all are seen as separate 1 of 1s. And we talked a little bit earlier. I mean, there is a case to be made that you could lump them together and treat them as out of 4. I just personally don't see it that way. I do see them. I see each of them as belonging to separate rows, to having very clearly defined separate designs. And I just, but I guess the same thing could be said about the checklist golds, and but so maybe I'm wrong on this, but anyway, for the purpose of evaluating for this list, I have treated the 4 Legacy Collection Masterpiece 1 of 1s as separate cards, and that is just intuitively how I see them. But maybe I need to think about that more deeply. But so those all come from, they are benefiting tremendously from coming from 97-98, which is the first year of 1 of 1s. So they are getting a big chronological rarity bump. They don't get any bump for being first in a lineage, but they're all benefiting quite a bit from being 4 different 1 of 1s. And then the other one that's tied with them for third is the 98 Greats 1 of 1 Masterpiece. So it has the same criteria as them. It's from the first year of 1 of 1s. So it's getting a big chronological rarity bump by virtue of being from 97-98. It's not the first in a lineage, so it's getting no first in a lineage bump, but it's getting that 1 of 1 bump too, as being the only version, the only 1 of 1 of it. It's the only version of itself. And then it tied for first in a rather amusing result. Is because both of these, this result is so amusing to me because both of these are flawed cards that if you sort of asked me to make this list on my own without just sort of like do my gut checklist, neither of these cards would have finished near first. But anyway, let's get to them. So the 2 are the 1997 Ultra Masterpiece 1 of 1 and the 1997 Upper Deck Power Deck 1 of 1 Michael Jordan, the subject of my trade with Stan. So if I were watching this video, I'd say, wow, he ranked his own card at the very top. And so obviously there's tremendous bias and flaw and error with this list. Totally fair criticism. I totally get it. And I wouldn't have the Power Deck 1 of 1 for first. Like if I sort of come in and massage this list and apply my bias and apply the aesthetic preference and apply experience and so on and so forth, Power Deck would not be this high. But the rarity thing does end up putting it this high because it's both of these cards are getting the thing that edges these cards, that gives them the highest score and ties them for first, is that they check all the boxes. They each are the first in a lineage. So the Ultra Masterpiece 1 of 1 here also has the purple Ultra Masterpiece 1 of 1 that comes after it. So there's the 2 Ultra Masterpiece 1 of 1s, and the Power Deck 1 of 1 has 3 more Power Deck 1 of 1s that follow it in the 1999-2000 season. So these are parts of lineages that extend across multiple seasons. So they're getting the first in a lineage, or the first in a type, or first of a type bump. They are from 1997-98, which is the earliest chronological appearance of 1 of 1. So they're, as far as 1 of 1s are concerned, they're getting the most chronological rarity bump you can get. And then they also are the only copies of their own type. So this is the only 1 of 1 of card number 23P from 1997-98 Ultra, and there are no other versions that there are no other arguable versions even. It's this. And then there is the 98 grade subset, but that card is themed and designed and is completely separate. And then you have the 1997-98 Power Deck 1 of 1. There's nothing else from Upper Deck period from 1997-98 that's a 1 of 1. So it's just truly the only version of itself. And so the rarity filter puts those at the top. And so I take issue with both of these cards, which has been documented elsewhere, but the Ultra Masterpiece 1 of 1, its front side is identical to the Platinum Medallion. The backside is different. The backside has the nice only Masterpiece 1 of 1 stamp, but it's difficult from the aesthetic. Remember, this list is not ranking aesthetics. This list is just using the dimensions of rarity that have been discussed: chronological, print run, and lineage rarity. But that's aesthetically that's tough to swallow. That if a Platinum Medallion and the Masterpiece were sitting on a table right next to each other, nobody could tell the difference. And then without turning them over. And then the Power Deck, I mean, first of all, it's a hybrid. It's a gimmick card, you might say, or it's a hybrid of a sports card and a CD that plays audio content. So it's weird. It's off the beaten path. And it's aesthetically, I mean, it's fine, but it's not like some of these, these showcases and stuff are just gorgeous. But here's the here's the flip side of it. If I can say something instructive about this whole process, is that I didn't actually do this process prior to making my trade with Stan for the Power Deck, but I didn't need to. I mean, what I knew about the Power Deck that made me want it very badly was that it was one of the 7 first-year 1 of 1s of Michael Jordan. So 1997-98, here's all 7. You have the 4 flares, the 98 grades, the Ultra Masterpiece, and the Power Deck. And I badly wanted to be in the club of those first ever Michael Jordan 1 of 1s. And so this was the closest I could get and ever could get. But going through this process, it sort of shows that even though I just made this list, like in response, I just took the list that I did for Cajun and I plugged in the 1 of 1s too in response to a collector request. And this is how it ended up spitting things out. That it does show it's sort of like, when I was asked to formalize my process, that some of the thoughts that I was having as a collector that were leading me to make decisions, like it shouldn't be surprising that the way that I process things ultimately ends up showing that, like these are cards that I'm targeting heavily. Like I would be beyond thrilled to get any of these 1 of 1s from 1997-98. I'd be beyond thrilled to get any of these 1 of 1s from 1998-99. Like, all of these. I mean, any card that even made this list is just I think is Grail status. But yeah, I mean, what this list is revealing is just sort of how I think about things as a collector, but formalizing it into an algorithm, into a formula, and asking it to spit out its ranking of cards without me massaging or changing anything. Just sort of, here are the rules. What is the result that comes on the other side? It's a neat way to sort of look behind the curtain of my own values as a collector. It's a neat way that I can sort of inspect my own thinking and sort of see where some of my shortcomings are. What are some things that I'm downplaying? What are some things I'm not thinking? Am I over-indexing on rarity? Is that even possible? just going back to the screen so I remember to reinsert the 98 Greats Platinum Medallion 1 of 1 there. But yeah, it's a very interesting and instructive thought experiment to go through. And in no way do I want it to be thought that this is the right ranking of Michael Jordan cards. That's not even close to what the point of this is. And what I do want to encourage is I would love to see other people do things like this, whether it's for Michael Jordan 90s cards, whether it's for another era of Michael Jordan cards, whether it's for a different player entirely, for a different sport. So content like this can be just so interesting, especially when it really forces a collector to introspect and figure out what their collecting principles are. And that sort of ties back to the big theme of this episode, which is collecting principles are just absolutely vital in this era and in the era going forward, especially as sort of price continues to sort of sneak in as is no longer being an output of collectors ranking, but instead being the input that determines collectors rankings. That returning to collecting principles and going through these thought experiments can really be a great calibrator to see if maybe the market is out of step or if we're missing something that the market is seeing that we're not. So thank you for tuning in. If you've listened for this long, we just crossed the 2-hour mark, so it's high time to bring this to a close. And we'll see you guys for another HOJ-Cast sometime next month.